Today's guest is a man who's lived the kind of stories most people only read about. Galen D. Peterson is a former U.S. Army tank commander who led men through the brutal streets of Baghdad and the chaos of Sadr City. He faced the realities of modern combat, survived a traumatic brain injury, and rebuilt his life one mission at a time. After leaving the military, Galen continued to serve, this time in law enforcement and on a SWAT team, earning his department's highest award for valor. Today, he's an acclaimed author whose books, including Strike Hard and Expect No Mercy and the Global Response Force series, bring raw authenticity and heart to the stories of those who serve. Please welcome a warrior, a survivor, and a storyteller, Galen D. Peterson.
There we go. Yeah, I wasn't sure what happened there for a minute. Technology, man. Even it knows it's Friday.
Oh yeah, I know how that goes.
So, welcome to the show. I'm excited to dive into this. Let's start out with a little bit. What brought you to the military, man?
Well, thanks for having me on for starters. And
no problem.
So I come from a long line of service to the country. My dad's side, we can trace ancestors to military service in the U.S. Army, literally right after stepping off the boat from Ireland in 1845.
Wow.
And my ancestors have been part of the military ever since. My mom's side was Navy, and my great-grandfather was a navigator on Admiral Byrd's expeditions to the North and South Pole. So it runs in the family. I knew I wanted to serve from a very early age. And at some point, playing Army turned into wanting to go into the Army. And as a result, I spent my whole high school time preparing myself to apply to West Point, and I was super excited when I got in. I got to say that was a blast. So it just was always in my blood.
Yeah, I bet the Army-Navy games was always exciting with your mom being on the Navy side.
Well, so the Army-Navy game was even more fun for me because I played the bagpipes.
Okay.
And we would go to Philadelphia with our pipes and we'd go play in an Irish pub somewhere, and we'd get dinner be provided as long as we played our pipes for them. And then we'd have a hotel room. And so I'd go down to Philadelphia with $20 in my pocket, and I'd come home with $20 in my pocket. It was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't beat that at all, man. So you come into West Point. What was it that you majored in?
So I majored in something that they called military art and science, which is just another way of saying tactics and operations. And then my engineering track, because everybody who goes to West Point is required to take some engineering classes. And so I did systems engineering, which, I really don't know what that is. My heart and soul was fully into making myself as good of an officer as I could possibly be when I graduated. When I first started out, I wanted to go infantry. I wanted to be a light fighter like the infantrymen in my family. And then we went to Fort Knox, and I fell in love with tanks. And from that day on, it was all about mechanized warfare and all about just the raw firepower and shock action that tanks can provide on the battlefield.
Yeah. I did some time with a mechanized unit in Germany. We were Bradleys. Our sister battalions was M1s. And so I got the fun exposure of working on them and breaking a track and all that really fun stuff us mechanics don't enjoy doing. But so you go to West Point. Did you get to pick your MOS or did you have to take whatever was offered?
So I was high enough ranking in my class that I got what I wanted, which was great.
Yeah.
That being said, I was a December graduate. So As a result, I didn't get to choose my post. The Army chose it for me. That being said, I really couldn't complain because they sent me to Fort Carson, which is about as good of a post as you'll ever get. But it wasn't on my list. I wanted to go to Germany. I wanted to go to Stewart. I wanted to go to Riley, or I wanted to go to Hawaii.
One of the big divisions.
Right. And instead I got sent to Carson, and, it was a really small post at the time. I mean, there was just 3rd ACR, the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, and 1 brigade out of 4th Infantry Division, and little itty bitty 10th group. Boy, I sure grew after that, though.
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah, I did some time at Carson while I was at Hunter. I spent 10 years with the 160th, and we were changing our fleet of Himmets. So I would go out there once every couple months to pick up a new vehicle and do the lookies over and make sure it's all good to go.
Nice,
man. Carson is a beautiful post. It really is. So you come out, your first unit is at Carson. And what was it that when you first got integrated with your platoon that you didn't expect, but happened anyways? Because I'm sure coming from West Point, everybody thinks what their platoon's going to be like and how they're going to lead and everything else. And then they get there and find out, it's pretty well different.
Yeah. So my introduction to my unit was wildly different than I had dreamed. And when I was at Fort Knox in Armor Basic Training, and like a week before graduation, and I had follow-on schools, and a week before graduation, got a phone call, and it was the brigade rear detachment, because the unit was deployed to Aqaba, Iraq at the time. And they had just gone through a series of fights and they needed some replacements. And so I got this phone call like, hey, we're canceling your follow-on schools. Army says you get 4 days travel time to get from Fort Knox to Fort Carson. We'll expect you on day 5. Oh, wow. Okay. And then she followed out with saying, be prepared to deploy within 3 or 4 weeks of arrival. All right. Well, that's different.
Yeah.
And I was excited. I mean, this is what we're born for. It was an opportunity that I was pretty excited about. So I got to Fort Carson and did all my in-processing, and I went down to the rear detachment headquarters, and I found the commanding officer for the rear detachment, and I marched in my greens and I saluted and said, Second Lieutenant Peterson reporting as ordered. And he didn't even look up from his computer. And it was just so dismissive. And wow, okay. And I was very glad to be deploying and getting away from him. And so there were a whole bunch of us that showed up kind of in that time frame, and some of them had gone through schools and some hadn't. And we all deployed over together, and I got to my battalion, 1st Battalion, 68th Armored at Aqaba, and there were 2 armor lieutenants, and the other one, Matt Vigent, had just graduated from Ranger School, so he was senior to me and in rank, as well as also just experience in general. So we got in there, and Colonel Fisher said, hey, I only got 1 platoon. So one of you is going to get a platoon. But that being said, I don't need another staff officer. So I'm going to send the other one down to Charlie Company, and you're going to be an assistant platoon leader. Right? Well, that doesn't exist. There's no such animal. But it was great, because then I got a chance to go down and go out on patrols to lead. And the platoon leader didn't really like going out on section patrols with the tanks, so I took all of those, which was a blast. And it gave me an opportunity to let the platoon leader and the platoon sergeant take time to take care of administrative stuff, and I would leave that section out for them. So that was a lot of fun, but it was definitely not at all what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting, because this is the first time I've had conversation with an officer, and that actually, when you think about it, there's 2 types of NCOs. You got your garrison NCO and you got your field NCOs, right? And it doesn't usually overlap. But I've never considered that officers that, there's 2 types too. And it sounds like the actual platoon leader was not a field officer. He preferred the garrison administrative type life, and you were excited because it gave you the field opportunity that you were looking for. So yeah, that's pretty fascinating, actually. I was more of the field guy. I didn't function well in garrison. I wasn't a red tape kind of person. And so I did do a lot of deployments, and I knew what it was like to have time as a leader before I experienced it. But you didn't get that opportunity. You literally were baptized by fire, and you had to learn your leadership style along with keeping everybody alive and doing your patrols and providing the intel that's needed when you get back and so forth. So what was that like?
So it was kind of interesting. So my first deployment and my second deployment were so completely and utterly different. So my first deployment, when I was this assistant platoon leader, and so we would do platoon patrols, and I'd be out there and I would just be a shadow, or sometimes I would take a squad and go do some other reconnaissance. If we did mounted and dismounted operations, the platoon leader would take the dismounts and I would take the trucks, and we would do a mounted patrol, which sometimes was a little interesting in the sense that we got into some things sometimes that we didn't really want to get into. And in the rural areas of Bakuba in the Diyala province, we were always trying to stay within a few minutes of response time, but we kept finding all these canals we couldn't cross, or the locals would put up barriers on the roads, and so we'd have to figure that out. But we didn't have the dismounts anymore to help us clear stuff out.
Yeah.
Giving intel back, we would, a lot of our intel that first deployment was coming from informants that were handled by the company commander. It was very rare that we actually gained something of value that deployment, which was frustrating. And we did a lot of raids that were, probably well-intentioned, but I don't know that we actually accomplished anything with them. And our area was not a great place. I mean, Abu Zakari was killed in my platoon sector. Yeah. And the populace was not very fond of us at all. And but that being said, they didn't really want to talk to us either.
Yeah.
My second deployment, when I had a different platoon and we were in Baghdad, we would talk to locals every day, and we were in an area that actually did trust us. And so we would gain intelligence. Probably the biggest thing we were gathering all the time was where you couldn't go with vehicles, or what buildings were occupied and which weren't, because that allowed us an understanding of the terrain that we were going to fight on. And then once the Battle of Sadr City started out, we weren't gaining really intel at all. We were just going into the fight with the tanks. We weren't talking to anybody. We were just going toe to toe with the enemy.
Yeah, Sadr City was not a chill place. That is for sure. I've had several guests on that was part of conflicts there in Sadr City, and it was a lot of battles, man, and a lot of fighting that took place there. A lot of people don't understand, when it comes to combat, it's not like people think. It's not like it's on the TV shows, and you only have the knowledge that you have, so if this is the first time you're in that area, especially out in the way from the bigger cities, where now there's contact out there, but you don't know whether it's a farmer or whether it's an enemy combatant or who it is that you're fighting against. You just know it's somebody with a rifle. And over there, that's anybody,
Oh, yeah.
And so I do think the bigger cities, the intel was better because it wasn't as operated by the enemy. They pretty well took the outer areas, the villages and so forth, where they could intimidate everybody. So yeah, that's a different type of fighting compared to your first encounter, where you were just encountering barricades and frustration from the locals. And they were probably doing it because they didn't want to get killed by the other side, So it is weird that, so you guys were with trucks mostly. You guys weren't using tanks through Sadr City, right? For the most part.
So when we deployed down into Baghdad, it was during the surge's dividend of peace, where there was a Sunni awakening. So the Sunni tribes were fairly peaceful, and they had a ceasefire with Jaish al-Mahdi, the Shia militia in Sadr City. And as a result, part of that was we were not going to take tracked vehicles into Baghdad. Okay. So when we went into Baghdad, we didn't take our tanks with us. We left them up at Camp Taji, figured we would not see them again for the rest of the deployment. And when we started fighting, initially we're on foot and in Humvees, and it was weird to be the smallest guns on the battlefield. We were out firepowered, and that was just not something that I had ever envisioned. And not only that, but Jaish al-Mahdi would outnumber us often, which again, that was something that we just never really thought about. We were expecting to fight small groups of enemy, maybe it'd be like a squad sized element at most, up to 10 guys. And then, on the 27th of March in 2008, I found myself pinned down by 100. And they had heavy machine guns, and they had large caliber mortars. And there were rumors that they had captured some T-72s and BMP-1s from the Iraqi army who fled their posts. And that day was wild and completely out of control. And that was the snapping point. We're like, all right, it's time to get the tanks. Yeah. And once we got our tanks down, we didn't go out in the Humvees again. And once we started pushing down into Sadr City, at first we were just trying to play whack-a-mole. We were just trying to hold the line to keep their artillery from getting within range of the green zone, because they needed to cross Route Gold and get into the Jamila and Tharwa neighborhoods of Sadr in order to reach it with the 107 millimeter rockets. But if we could hold Route Gold, they were just out of range. And so we were trying our hardest to hold this, but we were not successful. And every day we would take contact well before we got to Gold, and more units came in to reinforce us and help. And then somebody came up with this idea, well, let's just build a wall down Route Gold that they physically can't drive across, and we'll just stop them that way. And once we started doing that Route Gold barrier project, it was the most bizarre military operation, because we were doing a combined arms breach through their minefield, but instead of piercing it, we're going down the length of it, which is just not at all what you're supposed to do. But then as we're doing this, we're also dropping our own obstacle right through the middle of it. And we did that for just a nonstop grind. It took a little over a month to build that wall. And the militia they were willing to come out and fight the tanks. And it took a few days before we realized, like, they are willing to come out and attack the tanks. And they would go toe to toe with us. They would shoot RPGs at us. It was kind of shocking to find out that RPGs can penetrate an Abrams.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
No. And it's like the RPG-7s that were a dime a dozen that you see in the movies. Those generally won't. They'll damage it for sure. But then their RPG-29s is what they told us, but they probably could have been anything from 18s up. Like, well, this is new technology. Well, not true. The 29 was fielded in 1979. And that thing would go through. And we took casualties because of that.
Yeah.
And it was hard, because we would go out and we couldn't get our whole company out on the line at once, because we didn't have the manpower to do it. We didn't have the equipment to do it. At any given point, 2 of my 4 tanks were damaged to where they couldn't roll. And that was, company-wide problem. So we would go out in smaller elements. It would be 2 tanks and a Bradley. And then the other platoon would come out with 2 tanks and a Bradley and replace us. And we would because we'd be pretty much empty on ammo at that point. And we'd go back and we'd swap out crews, get more ammo, get more fuel, come back and do it again. And then another company would trade out with us, and we just kept pushing forward that way, just kind of an unrelentless grind. And some days we had a great day and we can go 100 meters, and some days it was terrible and we get like 10 meters. Just, it was all about what the enemy was wanting to do that day.
Yeah. Man, I didn't realize, I mean, I knew there was intense fighting. And I don't think I've ever had any guests actually talk about, what the fighting was about. So I didn't realize about Route Gold, like what you're talking about, that was really what it sounds like a lot of the fighting was about, was control, so that they could still be effective. And I can't even imagine you're trying to hold this line and build a wall at the same time. Man, that is intense.
It was crazy. And, once we got the wall in place, a couple of times they tried to breach the wall, and we would surge on it quickly and plug the hole and then go back to building more wall. And so the way we were doing it, was we would have the tanks and the Brads go up and establish a support by fire. So we would be at the end of the wall and we would try to dominate that area. And then the engineers would come up with their route clearance, and they would try to clear another 100 or 200 meters of road. And if it came up to a intersection, they would go all the way across the intersection to the far side and a little bit beyond it. And then they would pull back, and then we'd hold that area so they couldn't come in and put more IEDs in. And then we had a horizontal and a vertical construction company that would bring up a crane, and they would bring us T-walls from the protection of the wall. They'd come up on trucks, and then they'd have a forklift lift the T-walls off, set it down, and then the crane would set it up. And then the infantry squad out of our Bradley would have to throw a ladder on the scene, run up, unhook the chains, and then scramble back down. And every time they did it, it was just, that was the trigger for the shooting to just really escalate.
Yeah.
And the enemy would concentrate on intersections they would want to stop us at. And there was one, it was, I think we called it Route Charlie. No, it was Bravo. And that intersection was dominated by this big 4-story building on the south side. And then we had a whole bunch of covered awnings along the 2-story buildings going up Route Gold, and then going up Bravo into Sadr City were some more taller buildings. And they really focused on that. And we had fire restrictions on the south side of Route Gold because we had friendly units in there, and we didn't want to accidentally send a tank round into somebody. So we weren't supposed to shoot at anything south of that intersection. Well, that didn't always work. So sometimes we would try to chase them away by driving the tanks at the building and get them to flee the building. And then sometimes if we could identify clearly that, hey, this building is definitively enemy and there's no friendlies behind it, then we would start to tear that building apart.
Yeah.
And we even got guided MLRS strikes into there during that particular intersection, which one of the scenes like I never thought I would see artillery into a city, and we did that day.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy. And then we went up a few more blocks, and the wear and tear on our equipment by the time we got into May was so bad that things would break, and we lost most of our tools. Keep the tools in the sponson boxes on the side of the tanks. Every time something gets hit, you'd lose tools out of it. So we were down to just a handful of tools. And then in May, we were trying to snake through the remains of this old market to push up into the intersection, and my tank track broke. And what should have been like a 30 to 45 minute job to repair it ended up taking almost 12 hours. Because every time we tried to do anything, the enemy would start shooting at us, and just everything that could possibly go wrong was Murphy's Law at its finest.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of operations where we took casualties from exactly that. It wasn't so much the skill set of the Army that we were fighting. It was everything just fell right into place for on their side. And I had a lot of friends that was with Turbine 33 that was killed that day, and that's just another example of everything had to go absolutely perfect. And given that same day 100 times, it's successful one time, and it is brutal. I can't even imagine the stuff that you guys are doing with on top of still trying to stay alive and keep everybody else alive, but hold this ground that you got engineers and I'm sure there's probably mechanics and everybody else that are out there trying to keep the equipment running and your mission going. So I think, wow, man, that is deep. I didn't realize. So let me ask you this, because a lot of people don't, and I guess they don't really think about it, but it isn't uncommon for us to be outnumbered with our enemy, in both countries, Afghanistan and Iraq. But the skill set and the tools, we're superbly better than what they are. And I'm not going to say that evens it out, but I don't think people really fully understand the skill level and of people like yourself and a lot of other people where they fought and was successful against just absurd numbers,
Right. We have a lot of training. I would have to say that I felt extremely well trained going into that second deployment.
Yeah.
I felt that we could take on pretty much anybody and we would come out victorious. We might get bloodied, we might get battered, but we would ultimately prevail no matter what. It was crazy because the enemy we fought, they weren't superbly trained necessarily, but they had a lot of experience. I mean, they'd been fighting us for years. And by that point, the stupid ones have already gone away.
Yep.
What was weird is that sometimes they would have kind of weird skill set combinations. Like we had this one enemy mortar crew that had a 60 millimeter mortar, and they were consistently hitting my tank every single round. So they were very good at aiming it, but they didn't fuse a single one of those. So they were just throwing rocks at me.
Yeah.
So it was crazy that you could be so skilled at aiming, but not understand the most basic, like the round looks weird without a fuse on it.
Yeah.
So that was just kind of crazy that they were doing that. And they had, there were a couple snipers that were pretty talented and actually had pretty good equipment. But then you also had the guys that would come out and they would just aim their AK in the general direction and spray and cross their fingers, hope for the best. So it was just such a wide variety.
Yeah. It truly is over there. So I want to dive in because we still got a lot to get into. How long were you actually in the military? Did you retire or did you?
So I was wounded in Sadr City, and I never really recovered from that. And so I got medically retired in 2014.
Okay.
I was able to hang in there for quite a while before the ugly bird rose its head. And, it's one of those things where one day I was in the parking lot and I was strapping my daughter into the car seat and a gust of wind caught the door and I woke up on the pavement of the asphalt and not really sure what was going on. And that was the end of the career right there. And that injury set me back another 6 months of going through everything, trying to get going well enough. And so I got out and I was not ready to get out. I didn't want to get out. I didn't know what to do. I tried to work as a firefighter for the Forest Service, and I was a temporary, and I had to get rehired, and I didn't get rehired. So then I was really kind of at a loss as to what to do. And so that's how I ended up in law enforcement. And so I joined Breckenridge Police Department, and it's a small force of about 25 sworn officers. Mm-hmm. And the county as a whole had probably 120 officers total in it, between all the different departments, which some nights was more than enough to handle things. And then some nights we were stretched pretty thin. We used to have a joke that people would come there on vacation and leave on probation. And it was crazy. And this is up in the mountains, and there are a lot of people who go to the mountains to escape their demons, but their demons follow them there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, especially with military and PTSD, it is not uncommon for them to, say things like, I just wish I was off the grid and had nobody around me and so forth. And I think a lot of that dulls from the inability for other people to, one, understand what they're going through, and two, for them to relate that their identity isn't gone. It just needs some changing. And, you had gone out of the military now, not willing. So unlike myself, where I had made that decision, I was going to retire, you were still wanting to serve and still be part of it. And so you lost that identity. You lost your leadership identity as a leader. And on the same token, I'm sure there's still some part of you that was not believing you were broken, and yet, medically you were. And so to go into another service like the police department and fire departments, where now you're seeing a different type of trauma, but it's still trauma on a daily basis, whether it be a car accident or a crime. Those are still connections that your brain's going to make that aren't going to be positive thoughts and memories. How was the transformation from going from the military to law enforcement?
It was really interesting. So my experiences in combat made me very comfortable with danger. Mm-hmm. That was an arena that I felt comfortable in. I wasn't freaking out about, whoa, I could die right now. That right. We'd played that game so many times before that it wasn't a game anymore. And that allowed me to go into high risk situations with kind of a different mindset, where I was more focused on, well, how am I going to get out of this in the best outcome possible for everybody? And I would make good use of my cover and concealment to give myself the advantages, and understanding the tools. One of the things that really is very different, though, is when you're deployed, you go through pretty crazy stuff, and you've got your team with you, though, but you don't wake up and you're suddenly home. It's at the end of your deployment, whether you're coming back in a medevac plane, bouncing through launch school and then back to the US, or whether you're coming back with your guys and you go through Kuwait or wherever, and then you get back there, there's at least a week of decompression and thinking about things before you're back with your family.
Yeah.
And when you're a police officer, you have an incident, you've seen a dead body, or you have a near-death experience or a fight, and maybe 2 hours later, you're home, and you've got to somehow in 2 hours button down the hatches, because you can't show that to your wife. You can't show that to your kids. A lot of your friends don't want to see it. What's been seen can never be unseen. And at the same time, a lot of our friends, a lot of our families, they don't want to know what's out there. People live peaceful lives, and they want to believe that everybody believes is doing the same. And if they are exposed to the horrors that, less than 1% of the population is inflicting, that shakes their faith in humanity sometimes. So they just don't want to know. So you got to be able to tamp that down in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Probably one of the worst situations that I had was I had my critical incident that I got the Valor Award for. It was one of those days where I couldn't do anything right. And guy really just was tired of life and had a gun. And this is on the side of the highway, and it's the only way to go from Breckenridge to Frisco. And I was half a mile away when the call came out, so I'm going to be on scene in 30 seconds, and I'm going to take care of business. Well, shut down the highway, and things get resolved enough to where we can open it up. But now I've got the fire department and the ambulance there, and my wife was heading to an appointment in Frisco, and she got stuck in the traffic after she had watched cop car after cop car after cop car go screaming past with lights and sirens. And then the road gets closed, and then she finally gets to go through, and I had the only Ford Taurus in the fleet. And there's a Ford Taurus sitting on the side of the road behind a suspect vehicle, and a whole bunch of cops standing around but not doing anything, and an ambulance with the EMTs and the firefighters kind of twiddling their thumbs outside of, and I'm nowhere to be seen. And she drives by this. And in the meantime, like, I'm not having a good day. I don't have my phone on me, and she's blowing my phone up, and I'm not in my cop car answering my phone. And for the next 3 hours, I'm not answering my phone. And that was so detrimental to our relationship.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's things like that you don't think of as a soldier, because it's just your family's so separated.
Yeah.
Physically separated from what you're seeing. And then as a police officer, you might actually be responding to your neighbor. You might be responding to something in front of your own family. And that's a very different animal.
Yeah. I never thought about it that way. You know, you are right. And it kind of adds more to the thought process from my first book. You know, my first book, the point of it that I was hoping that people would get from it is you have to make that choice, whether you're going to share what you've seen and what you've gone through with your family, you know, not necessarily your kids, but your wife or a significant other. And if you're not going to, then the downside to that is when you reach your breaking point and your house of cards starts to crumble. One of the things I suffered with was I pushed my family away because I felt like they didn't understand what I was going through. And it's because I never shared any of this. Yeah. You know, like you said, they like to believe, you know, that life is good and people are good. And by the way, I wish you'd share that with my first therapist, because she thought I was crazy because I locked the doors, you know, and I thought she was crazy because she doesn't lock her doors.
Right.
You know, so we definitely seen different sides of the world, but when you see these daily, and then you have to digest them in a matter of hours, you know, we have, even if you don't start the digestion process until you actually get on the plane to head home, you got half a day to a full day before you're going to see your family. And then probably another 4 hours worth of paperwork when you get back before you're going to get to see them, you know? Yeah. So you got not plenty of time, but you've got more time. And it doesn't happen day after day after day. You guys are regurgitating that same process almost every single day. So man, I now see how much harder I even think it is than it is for the soldiers. Just because of the way our world is. Let me ask you this. Do you think that police officers, or law enforcement or first responders, do you think that's the same kind of, do you think there's an option for that if they had shared some of the stuff they went through with their families, do you think that would help with some of their, because I mean, they're a high suicide rate as well. It's not just a veteran thing.
That's a tough one. One of the challenges that I've thought about, and like writing my experiences of Iraq was very therapeutic for me. Well, we can come back to that later, but I can't really do that as a police officer because I don't even know where some of these court cases ended up at. Right. And I don't want to write about a crime. So then I'm going to have to do a lot of fictionalizing of names and trying to change events a little bit to not make it so obvious. And that's just, it's a challenge that I don't really want to dive into. Yeah. One of the things that we did well, at least when I moved to State Patrol, was that if you had a major incident, we had a peer support team that would immediately reach out to you. So these are other officers reaching out and saying, hey, crazy day today. You want to talk about it? And that helps a lot. And I was on the peer support team for the state patrol. And so I would go sometimes as far away as like 150 miles away to go meet with somebody and make sure they're good. And that helped a lot. But by that point, we had really started to understand a lot of that mental health burden that everybody was starting to see. And this is now all the way from Trayvon Martin, going through the George Floyd era, and the stress levels were just out of control, especially in 2020. And so we did put a lot more effort into making sure that we were taking care of people as best we could. But you also don't want to be that weakling that's like, oh yeah, no, I'm sucking. I'm hurting really bad today. It's like, oh no, I'm fine.
Yep. I think that comes from the type A personality that is required to be in those types of careers. To be a good soldier, you have to have some of that type A personality. You don't want the guy next to you to do more push-ups or run faster or do their job better or whatever. And it all comes together as the better I am, the more somebody else is going to want to be better than me. And it tightens up that length of chain to where you don't have a super weak link. And I think that is similar to what you're describing there. Is nobody wants to admit that they can't do their job and be that type A personality and lead from the front. And I think, I feel like that part of that comes from, we don't fully understand what the healing process is. We can break our arm and the doctor can say, in 6 months, you're going to be back to normal. Like it never happened. And they can see that healing process and they know how the bone's going to heal and they know what you're going to be able to do again and what movements you're going to be able to recover. But I don't think anybody truly can say that about PTSD or even TBI. TBI is really on the front of research right now.
Yeah, and there's so much we don't know, and there's so much we'll probably never understand. Because the brain is so wildly complicated. What's cool is that it can remap itself. Most people talking to me today on an average day would have no idea that I spent a year learning how to walk without falling over, learning how to speak again and not sound completely like a drunken, slurring idiot who can't even figure out what the word he's looking for is. It's only when I'm really tired that it comes out. Most people wouldn't be able to tell that. And that's because over the last, 15 years now, the brain has been consistently relearning and, it's like I'm a 15-year-old kid again.
Yeah.
But that's pretty cool. With the mental health healing, every day you find something positive to try to, one of the things that my wife has me do is like, if something's bothering me, she's like, all right, well, let's tie a positive thought into this thing. And so that maybe it's not always bad that, this grief comes up or this memory of this incident comes up. Let's think of something funny that happened that day. Let's think of something else to try to balance, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And that helps a little bit. And, with time, it doesn't really go away. With grief, it changes with a little bit with time, but it's just as strong. And, I still find there's certain places here in the US, where I used to work, the streets where if I can avoid that road, I will. If I can avoid that gas station, I will. It might be the only functioning gas station for 10 miles, but I'll risk running out of gas before I go to that place again. And that's just, I'm avoiding it, but at the same time, I have options. I can.
Yeah.
And then writing for me is probably the most therapeutic thing I can do, because it gives me this ability to let my mind go creative and then take these experiences and fictionalize them. And if I can take these little nuggets and I can change them so much into a thriller, that experience has been kind of whitewashed out into something totally different. But my brain's had a chance to process it and get it out. When you write, it's amazing how you're thinking about it over here on this part of the brain, and it goes to this part of the brain, and you write it and then you read it with this part of the brain, and then you digest it again, and it helps just process everything so much better. And for me, that is the ultimate in therapy.
Yeah.
You just can't beat it.
Yeah. And that makes perfect sense to me as well, because, almost all my books have to deal with either my time in the military or mental health. And, I wrote a fiction book, and when I wrote it, I didn't write it with the intent to make it a good story. I made it in a way that there's so many people out there that can't put their thumb on, what are you talking about? Depression. Why don't you just get over whatever your problem is? They just don't understand it because they can't see it. It's not, like I said, a broken arm or something. So I wrote a book, and I took the phrase, he lost his battle to his demons, or he's fighting his demons. And I changed it to, what if, I changed it to, when demons follow us home. And I changed it to where I made it a negative entity that would attach themselves to us and follow us around and feed off of our guilt and so forth. And I did it with the intent to let people have something physical to see and relate to. But I did get the same thing out of what you were talking about. It did make me feel better because, one, I wasn't the main character. These things at that point didn't necessarily happen to me, but they are my experiences that I'm putting into these characters. And so you do get a little bit of both sides to this. You do get to have to relive your story, at least in your head, to put the relations to the characters, which is healing, as well as you can control the outcome of these characters. Do they get better? Do they get healing? And so forth. So that makes perfect sense to me. When I started my book, I struggled. One, because it was about my stories and the things that happened with me, but also I didn't realize how hard it was to write a book. I live these stories. It should be easy. I should know the events and everything else. And, I discovered, one, that reliving the events was hard because I hadn't really started healing. I was treating the medication they were giving me like it was cold medicine. I'm having a symptoms, take my medicine, but I wasn't doing any of the healing processes to heal. And so I struggled, and I put the book down and started back up again and so forth. But I did find therapy through writing it. Not necessarily the publishing part, but I struggled because you have to reread this book time after time between the editing process and everything else. And when you're rereading those same events and making you think, I struggle with it. Do you find that same thing, that, there's hard parts to the book?
Yeah. So when I was writing Strike Hard, well, first of all, Strike Hard and Expect No Mercy, my memoir of Sadr City, that started out as my daily journal. And it was just me ranting to myself about the day. Yeah. And then as a therapy project, a few years later, I started the process of converting that as if I was telling somebody else the story. And it still meant it was very personal. I had no intentions of ever sharing it. And it was huge. It was a big, big document. And one day my mentor and I were talking, and he'd published a book, and it came up, and he asked me to send him a copy. So I sent him my manuscript, and he started pestering me about, you got to publish this. This has to be shared. You have to share this. And no, I don't. But I respect you enough that I will do the research to find out what it takes to publish. I'll research the publishers and figure out who I would send it to. And I'll even draft the letters and or the emails and just sit on them. Well, and then one Christmas Eve, I got the liquid courage and hit send on those emails, and it was crazy. In less than a week, I was under contract.
Wow.
And that was wildly not what I was expecting. I was expecting to wait 6 months and then write it off because I never heard anything back. But in that period where we were going from, you should publish this. One of the things I really wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that what I put down on paper wasn't just my distorted view of what had happened, that was actually what happened. Yeah. So I was going through the sworn statements and going through the battalion history to see what actually everybody else saw. And then there were some stories that I needed to make sure I told very carefully. And so that meant phone calls to people like, hey, I don't think that telling the story without this vignette is possible. I need your help on how you want me to address this.
Yeah.
And then there were some that we took out. It's not necessary for the overall theme of the book. Let's just take that out. And then there were some like, nobody's ever going to believe this. Let's just take that out because it is too crazy. And that was the hardest part, was just going through and making sure everything was accurate. That was hard. And there was one story in particular that I worked with the soldier repeatedly because we wanted to make sure that the source of information was filtered out enough to where it wasn't so obvious who came across this info. And that took a lot of effort to write that in a way that didn't come off as completely like changing the story. It's just, we're going to filter it and we're not going to attach names to anything, and how we're going to do that. And then how do you handle people who didn't meet their expectations? Because that has to be part of the story, because, we all make mistakes, and I can talk about my mistakes. That's perfectly fine. Nobody's going to get too upset with that. If I say, yeah, I screwed up, but somebody else might be a little offended if they screwed up really badly and I have to tell that story. So then I was figuring out how to do that and getting advice on that. That was hard. That was the nice thing about when I switched to writing fiction, is I didn't have to worry about that at all. It's one of my favorite things. Fortunately, it's fiction. So you can be offended about it, but it's fiction. And that makes it so much easier when you don't have to do that. But I still want to make things as accurate as possible, because I want it to teach a lesson. I want it to make people think about things and understand that combat experience. If we were to go to war with Russia, what would that look like for the soldiers on the ground? And that way people, if they read it like, well, yeah, it's fiction, but that's very plausible. That's probably what it would look like. Do I really want to be in favor of that or not? Let's go into this with a sober mind.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And again, I think part of that, we say, especially in combat, that we made a mistake and it caused this and this and this. But what a lot of people also fail to realize is, every firefight, every contact that's made with the enemy, there's 1,000 different outcomes that could happen. They may both end in a certain way. Either the enemy dies or we have casualties, either way. But it is a chess match, and it's not necessarily that somebody made a mistake. It's we were prepared for a different outcome, and we took that tactic. And we call it a mistake because we expect to be perfect. We expect to live up to that. We are the greatest military in the world, and when we lose casualties, we take that as we lost. We didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And we're so hard on ourselves, man. We expect to live up to those standards, and they're just not realistic standards. Any form of competition, you're going to have a winner and a loser. All we can do is hope that our skill set is better and things go the way we're supposed to do. I mean, you talked about your tank track breaking. Well, what do you do in that scenario? I guarantee you that wasn't the top of y'all's training list to deploy. Was let's reenact having to get our track together at the same time, fighting the enemy. It might have been a scenario you went over with, but it wasn't a focus point,
Right. And we definitely didn't even think like, well, let's see if we can do this without the tools we need.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's, that's one of the things I try to write in my books is to help teach some of these lessons that the Army doesn't teach anymore. It's
right.
Tankers are, I remember when we went to the field for the first time as a company commander, and we started doing tank on tank because we're starting to focus on Russia again. And there are a lot of people who were very angry with me because like, we're going to go out and tank, and it's going to be ugly. We're going to make a mess. And there are a lot of people who are pretty angry about that, but I can look back on it and say I was right and you're wrong, but I was the one standing at the position of attention for 45 minutes getting yelled at. So, but those are lessons I'd like to, in fiction, write about things so people can think about them. And there was a book when I was just starting out called Team Yankee that was very inspirational to me. And I learned so much from that fiction book. And that's what I hope that my books will do today is, provide lessons for somebody.
Yeah. And I agree 100% because I continue to podcast because I feel it's important that everybody documents their story. I don't have just military on here. Anybody that is willing to come on that has a valid story and is not trying to sell a product, I want to come on. And, I may be far-fetched, but I look at it this way. If George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and everybody back then had the ability to document through podcasting where we could see them, hear them, and understand what they were thinking, you can't tell me that something wouldn't have came out of that could have changed a thought process, a law, a direction that we went,
Oh, yeah.
And I hope that things that you're saying right now in the future, people look at, and it changes the way we consider tactics and war and training. And I'm working on a project where I'd like to see psychologists actually being implemented as a battalion position, and kind of
that would be game changing.
I agree, because now that psychologist isn't the enemy. He's part of the team. He's another warfighter. And, at that point, he's interacting, he's training the soldiers for resiliency, and he's getting to know his command, no different than your doctors. And now that stigma of you talking and interacting with that guy, he's no longer the enemy. He's just another guy in the battalion that you're talking to. You don't know whether you're talking about training, resiliency, or marital problems at home, but you've got to get rid of that stigma first, that it's okay to interact with that person and not be judged on what's going to happen. So that is something I'm working on as well. And it is all about making a better warfighter, that doesn't come home broken, and find a better way to use these guys that I deployed 68 months total out of 20 years. That's 20% of my career was spent fighting. And you use a guy over that. We already discussed in the past about how you make connections with your mind, and that's scab over scab after scab that has to be undone years later,
Right.
So it is a struggle when you try to put these components together. But your point is exactly right. Not only from your books are going to people take your story, but they're going to understand your thought process of what you went through and what you were thinking at that time, and be able to make decisions in the future on whether or not history was right about what they're teaching about our war. It's impossible that our war is not put in the history books. It's the longest American war in history. And to not have it in there would be insane. So,
well, I mean, it really just changed the Middle East completely.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And there's even so much to take from the psychological side of this. You know, how many soldiers, if asked, would you go back? You know, you could be talking about all the problems that they're having, the things that they're struggling with, and then ask them at the end of it, if you could do it all over again, would you go back? And in a heartbeat, almost all of them would say that. And I think a lot of that comes from life becomes simpler over there. You know, you literally, you wake up, you do your job, you try to stay alive, and you come back and eat dinner and wash, rinse, repeat. You know, you're not focused on anything else. Hopefully, you know,
obviously you're just taking care of each other.
Yeah. And so it is crazy to not think that there's so many things that we could learn from this, to help in the future. You know?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What, are you writing full time now, or is it still a passive, job?
It's still passive. It's a hobby.
Yeah.
I probably spend 20 hours a week to 40 hours a week on it, but you know, I want things to be right, and I'm very particular about my writing. So sometimes I don't make a whole lot of progress, or I'll make a lot of progress and then I'll say, no, this isn't going the right way, and I'll trash can it and start over again. I did the math. I can probably switch to full-time retiring when I'm 67 years old and my retirement benefits kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to retire. I'm not going to lie, you know, but you know, you said it best earlier. Some days you make 10 meters, some days you make 100, you know. The most important part to that was every day you got up and you improved your foxhole at least a little bit every day. So, absolutely. Well, Galen, I'm going to bring you forward, man. I'm going to let you tell everybody where they can get your books and where they can follow you. I know me and you met on LinkedIn, but got any socials or any websites out there? Feel free to.
So my website is galandpeterson.com, and you can read about the books. You can read about things I'm passionate about there. If you want to get the books, really the easiest way to find it is just Amazon. Amazon has everything, it seems like. And Strike Hard and Expect No Mercy is the only one that's in audiobook also. And maybe someday I'll put the Global Response Force in audio format, but I haven't got to that point yet. It's always a budget. And working on the next few books in the series, and hope to have them out soon for you. But it starts with Redcon 1 and then Lightning 6 and Task Force Thunderbolts. Redcon 1 is fictional war against China in the South China Sea. And then the other two are fictional war against Russia in Ukraine. And it's all from the perspective of a tank